Last week, President Trump designated Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. We're going to talk about it on today's Hot Zone.
This is the Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hey folks, Chuck Holton here. I've got my friend Todd Bensman back from the Center for Immigration Studies, and he wrote an interesting article the other day about this designation. You would think it would be a really good thing to designate these cartels as foreign terrorist organizations because, I mean, it's an easy case to make that they are every bit as brutal as ISIS or any other terrorist organization. But Todd, you say it might not be such a great idea to make that designation. Tell me why that is.
Sure, Chuck. Appreciate you having me on, first of all. My thinking about this goes to the heart of the post 9/11 counterterrorism infrastructure that we built to take on Islamic terrorists both abroad and also at home. And by tackling them abroad and internationally, that also protects us at home. And so we built up this really arguably successful counterterrorism infrastructure in the enterprise here in the United States. And if you designate Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organization, my fear is that this will overnight overwhelm and crash our counterterrorism and or severely damage it or stress it to the point of breaking our ability to continue to fight the war on Islamic terrorism. And I'm not saying that it wouldn't be a useful tool to bring to bear against the Mexican cartels. I just feel like not enough thought has gone into its impacts on our counterterrorism enterprise in the United States. And I'm just calling for, hey, hit the pause button here. You know, we don't need to hit the panic button, hit the pause button, and try to figure this out a little bit more in terms of thinking and analysis.
Okay, I hear you. But for our listeners, let's talk a little bit about what it means to make that kind of a designation.
Right. So statutorily, the requirements to designate an organization as a terrorist organization are three areas. Three things have to be met. One is it has to be foreign, which the cartels fit. It has to be a national security threat, which I am not convinced the cartels fit. And the organization has to be primarily motivated by some political or ideological goal, which I also don't think the cartels fit. You can shoehorn those in certainly, but I would argue that the cartels are criminal organizations that do not fit the definition. Not that anybody's going to go to the Ninth Circuit Court and appeal this. I'd be interested to see what that looks like. But once you have the FTO designation, this brings to bear several very important and powerful American tools. One is that you can conduct what's called material support investigations against anybody who is deemed to be supporting that cartel. That means Crips and Bloods in Chicago. That could mean transnational gangs that are in Texas prisons that orchestrate the movement of drugs from the border into the interior. And it certainly could mean, tens of thousands of Mexican members or employees of 9 different cartels. Nobody has come forward whatsoever at this point. I'm hoping that they're thinking about this and just haven't come out with it. But at least publicly, nobody has come forward and said, how are we going to scope this down so that the FBI and U.S. Department of Treasury, ICE, and everybody else is doing a little part of Islamic, the war on terror, aren't completely overwhelmed by, 100,000 new Mexican terrorists. I think that it is advisable to just hold on a minute and think about the use of that particular tool to attack the cartels. There are lots of other tools that are already in play right now. Just hold on a minute, find out What that's going to do to the CT mission here in the United States is all I'm asking. I'm taking a lot of heat for that, but
yeah, tell me about the reaction you've had so far.
oh, look, I think on this issue, what's emerging is maybe a division among friends, conservative Republicans who, like myself, I would regard myself as a border security hawk, equal to none other border security hawk. But I think that, we also have in our ranks people who are very concerned about continuing to counter Islamic extremism in the United States. Almost all the FTOs right now, if you look at the list, between 65 and 70 are Islamic terrorist organizations. We don't put criminal organizations in that slot for a reason, and we're resourced right now to just handle those 65 to 70 terrorist organizations. If you just suddenly quintuple that number, I don't really know what the impact is going to be, but I think we should know what the impact is going to be before we do it. By the way, Trump has not actually designated it. He announced that they're in the process. It's probably a 6-step process that the State Department requires to designate them. So it's not too late to hold a little bit.
Oh, my bad. Okay, so now here's my question. So one of the ways that I think that you can sometimes kind of suss out whether or not something is a good idea is to do what I call the reduction to the ridiculous. That is, kind of push something to its extreme logical conclusion and kind of see where you end up, one way or the other. So some people that I've read are saying, well, this is a good thing because although they don't necessarily have to make use of any of the tools it will give them, it will at least make available to the government a whole lot of tools that they don't have right now that they could use to go after these cartels. However, reduction to the ridiculous, if we push that to its logical extreme, does it concern you that perhaps maybe the next administration or a future administration could then use this as, if nothing else, a precedent to go after other organizations that don't fit that, and like you said, kind of shoehorn them in and get to the point where I'm thinking like, so I have a friend who's a missionary in central Mexico up in the highlands where they grow a lot of the dope up there, and he's serving the people in that region. It's an Indian tribe called the Guajiro that actually work in the pot fields. So could this missionary at some point, could they say, oh, well, you're supporting the people who are working in the pot fields, therefore we can come after your assets, or so like how deep?
Yeah, I mean, look, the second you break with the precedent that we are going to designate FTOs pretty much to Islamic organizations, then it just opens the gate completely. Like, at what point do you keep the precedent of countering Islamic terrorism relatively pure, I guess, and open the gates to really anyone? I would argue that we, as a country, have a number of tools that are already in play. Granted, that those tools are demonstrably not 100% effective against these cartels because let's face it, criminal organizations that are involved in illicit, devious industries like supplying vice will almost always find some way around whatever you throw at them. That's the nature of the game. It's cat and mouse. I don't see a reason to, but I'm saying it does work for the Islamics. I mean, in just this month alone, we've the FBI has brought like 6 or 7 different indictments against Islamics in the United States. There was a mall plot. There were material support cases. I mean, the FBI is using these FTO designations to knock these Islamists out completely, one by one. Just this month, at least half a dozen, and I didn't even look at October, or November.
But don't you imagine that a lot of people would love to see on the news that some narco-traffickers' hacienda in Mexico just erupted in flame because we dropped a JDAM on it? I mean, obviously, AMLO, the president of Mexico, is very weak on crime. His motto has been hugs, not guns, when it comes to dealing with the narco-terrorists, and I don't know that hugging them is really the best option. So, I mean, don't you think from an emotional standpoint, a lot of Americans are going to be like, well, yeah, of course, let's do this?
Well, personally, I'm all about bombs, not hugs. The FTO designation does not imply permission to conduct military operations in a foreign country. We don't need permission to do that. Sure, it would be outrageous and people would complain and all the rest of that, but I argue actually for the border wall, which would impede a lot of the drug smuggling. I'm not saying don't build the border wall. I'm saying actually build it and do it fast and do it well. And I also don't necessarily, I'm not opposed at all to, Osama bin Laden like special forces operations to take out kingpins, especially when they attack American citizens. But the FTO designation is something different. It's a bureaucracy that is finely tuned and in balance right now over 17, 18 years that we've had a chance to build it and fine tune it and hone it. And to just, for a political shot in the arm, it feels good to do it, to sort of potentially wreck that bothers me. And I just think we should hold. Also, Chuck, I'll mention this, that I don't think that the Mexican cartels actually are a national security threat to us, not a major one. And this is controversial, but for one thing,
you're saying that they are not actively targeting, trying to kill American citizens like the Taliban or like jihadists are. Planning operations in the United States to cause mayhem because we're their biggest customer. They don't want to do that, right?
I mean, we a healthy, prosperous United States with healthy, prosperous drug users in the United States is the best thing for the cartels. They understand that. They are not trying to destroy America. They're not pursuing some ideal. They keep almost all of their gun battles and atrocities on their side. You'll see occasionally some Americans that get caught up in that in Mexico. But look, face it, everybody knows that if you live and travel in Mexico, you're making a decision to take on that higher risk anyway. It's a foreign country. If you're going to walk around Mexico, there's a higher risk involved with that. So there's I feel terrible that the Mormon Americans were slaughtered like that. There were women and children. I think that there should be an American reaction, a forceful American reaction against that particular cartel. I wouldn't rule out a military option for that, despite AMLO. But this FTO designation is not the answer to that.
Right.
There's some other answer to that. That's not this. This feels good, but it's not the answer. Look, one more thing, Chuck, if I can just say, one of the most commonly cited justifications on national security grounds for this FTO designation is the opioid crisis, which has killed 60, 70,000 Americans. And the way it's framed is the Mexican cartels are killing thousands of Americans. And that is an inflammatory misdirection. That is not true that the Mexican cartels are deliberately trying to poison thousands of Americans. I would argue that those American deaths bear some attribution to individual choice.
Yeah, more like suicide than it is like homicide. I mean, if you're look, there is one thing about there is something to be said for the fact that these cartels' product have, without doubt, killed a lot more Americans than radical Islamic jihadists have. But at the same time, the people have to put it in their mouth voluntarily, and so it does bear some of the hallmarks of a suicide more than of a homicide, or at least an assisted suicide, I guess.
It's akin to blaming guns and ammunition, the supply of guns and ammunition, Sandy Hook and these mass shootings on gun stores.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you make a real good point there. And I would like to see some kind of dramatic military response to the killing of these Mormons that were in Mexico. But and I think really what this all comes down to, this designation and everything else, is just it comes down to politics. That the president knows this is going to play well with his base. It's something that can make it look like he's doing something about it. Don't we already have an FCO designation, a foreign criminal organization designation, like for MS-13 and guys like that?
Yeah, TCOs.
So what's the difference, as far as politically, with doing that?
Well, first of all, the TCO designations allow for fiddling with interdicting financial assets, and
right.
It does provide tools to the U.S. enterprise countering cartels. But what happens is the cartels get around it. That, like I said before, they're adaptable. Mm-hmm. And so the proponents of FTO designation point to that and say, look, it's not working. There was a big gun battle last night in Nuevo Laredo. 19 people were killed, proof that it's not working. We need this new thing. I would argue that the new thing is going to be the same as the old thing in terms of outcome, except that there's a good chance that it's going to mess up something a different priority that seems to be working pretty well right now.
Yeah.
And
you're right about the wall. I mean, no matter what, if we build that wall, it's going to stand for 100 years or more. I mean, it's a passive defense mechanism that the next administration, whatever their political stripe, is not going to be able to go tear down. They're not going to go bulldoze that thing once we put it up. And it will protect America for generations to come. And it won't cause the kind of political upheaval that bombing Mexico would. So it just makes so much sense to do. Have you heard anything, last question because we're out of time, have you heard anything about the effect of the wall that we've already built down at the southern border? What kind of impact it's having, say, around El Paso or along San Diego, in that area?
Sure. The walls, in the areas where the walls went up, the drug trafficking, evidence of drug trafficking and people smuggling plummeted to like fractional percentages of what they were in those areas. Mm-hmm. What they do is they just go around them to the areas where they don't have the wall yet, and
right.
Continue to do that.
They'll keep doing that until we get it built all the way. But that's why we got to get the darn thing built. Great. Well, thank you, Todd. I really appreciate your insight on this. You are the expert that I go to when we want to talk about immigration stuff. So I hope we can have you on again. Thanks.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.